Hello again, and welcome back to year 3. This is week 42, day 3. We're continuing our way through the Gospel of Matthew. And of course, it's year 3 of the Religious Education Initiative. So, continuing our way through the Gospel of Matthew, we're halfway through Matthew 16, and we'll continue into Matthew 17. Last time we saw the Lord feed the 4,000, and once again he came into conflict with the Pharisees and Sadducees, who came after him, demanding he give them a sign to prove his authority. He noted the foolishness of them demanding a sign like that immediately after he has worked such great signs and wonders as we have seen in the last several chapters, and then he warns his disciples against the leaven, the yeast of these two factions, the spirit and the worldly fixations that consume them. Anyone who partakes of these, he says, will be corrupted by them. Now, this time, as he proceeds on his way, he begins to ask his disciples who the people think that he is. So, verse 13. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, rocky, Petros, and on this rock, Petra, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "God forbid it, Lord, this must never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Then Jesus told his disciples, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself, alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." And the disciples asked him, "Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" He replied, "Elijah is indeed coming, and will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but they did to him whatever they pleased. So also the Son of Man is about to suffer at their hands." Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them about John the Baptist. All right. This is a longer reading, and there's a lot in here. I'm going to go backwards. When the disciples ask their question, why did the scribes say Elijah must come first? Effectively, what they're saying is, okay, we know what we just saw. We saw you revealed as God himself, although they don't necessarily get that. They saw him bright, they heard the voice of the Father, and yet they don't comprehend, it seems, what that means in full. But they know that he's the Messiah. That's been the context of everything here. So they're asking a real question. They had been looking for the Messiah. They didn't know who the Messiah was going to be, exactly what he was going to do. There are a lot of different ideas, but what's clear, at least from the perspective of the scribes who studied the prophecies, is that Elijah is supposed to come before the Messiah to prepare his way. So they ask, why do the scribes say? They're like, okay, you're the Messiah. We get that. Where was Elijah? Did we miss him? Is that wrong? And Jesus replies, Elijah is indeed coming and will restore all things, but he actually has already come, and they didn't recognize him. So he's saying, no, the prophecy is good. It does mean Elijah is coming. He will restore, which is to say reconcile, the fathers to the sons, reconcile the people to their God. But he's saying, but that prophecy, it's real, it's true, it's valid, but it's already been fulfilled. They didn't recognize Elijah, and they did whatever they wanted to him. And then they said, oh, it was John the Baptist. Of course it was John. Of course. He was even in the desert. He was dressed like him. Of course. What were we thinking? We should have realized that. So the rest of this, these passages have been so proof texted that, and ripped out of context. And it's striking to see this in context, because up to this point, the disciples have been with Jesus. They've seen him do miracles, but we haven't had a discussion between him and them about who he is, about what his role is, about what his purpose is, about who he is. So he asks them here, having done these miracles, okay, what are the people saying about me? And they tell him what they're hearing. And he says, okay, so all the people think I'm one of the prophets, maybe Elijah, maybe John the Baptist, maybe Jeremiah, who knows? What do you think? You've been with me. He's looking to see if they've caught on, if they understand the signs of the times. Because if we remember last week, he was saying to the scribes and Pharisees, you know the signs of the weather, but you don't know the signs of the times. So he's asking his disciples, do you get it? Do you understand what's happening? And Peter says, yes, you are the Messiah. You are the Christ. You are the anointed one. You are the one who was promised. And he says, you are the Son of the living God. Right? That's pretty good for Peter. And Jesus blesses him and says, flesh and blood has not revealed this to you. My Father in heaven has revealed this to you. Which is to say, you didn't learn this from the scribes and Pharisees or the Sadducees, obviously. They can't read the signs of the times. How do you know this? A mere fisherman? My Father has revealed it to you. And then he says, I tell you, you are Peter. So this is recognizing this first confession of who Jesus is. So it's a moment of significance. Peter has been the voice. He's the first one to acknowledge, to recognize, to confess that Jesus is the Messiah, that he is the Son of the living God. So Peter says, so Jesus says to him, you are Peter. You are the rock-like one. You are Petros, the rocky. And on this rock, not Peter isn't the rock, but the truth that Peter has confessed, this necessary reality that the Son of God has become the Son of Man, this reality is the foundation of the church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And to those who acknowledge Christ, to those who confess him, which right now is Peter, he says, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind will be bound, whatever you loose will be loosed. And then he tells him not to tell anyone that he's the Messiah. Now, Jesus gives this same authority. He gives the keys of the kingdom of heaven, the power to bind and loose, to all of the apostles later on. But Peter is the one who gives voice to this. So, obviously, this is a matter of controversy, because the Roman Catholic Church has claimed that this means that Peter and his successors in Rome have an intrinsic authority as the princes of the bishops, as the bishops of bishops, as the vicars of Christ. This is not something that the Orthodox Church recognizes, obviously. And I think that reading is difficult to get out of the passage, where what we've just said is fairly clear. And it helps, too, that after Peter confesses this, that Jesus is the Messiah, then Jesus begins to teach his disciples what the role of the Messiah actually is. Peter doesn't like it. Peter doesn't get it. He thinks, oh, you're the Messiah, you're the Son of God. Obviously, you come, being the Son of God, to make everything right, to whoop on the Romans, not to be killed like a false Messiah. That's not in the program. And he starts to rebuke Jesus, which means he confesses that he's the Messiah. He confesses that he's the Son of the living God. I don't think Peter has quite comprehended that means that Jesus is himself the second power in heaven, the eternal Logos and Word of the Father. Peter gets that Jesus is the Son of God, but he's still thinking human. Right? Chosen by God, got a job to do, but you don't rebuke the eternal Word of God. You don't rebuke God himself. So Peter doesn't get it. He's not perfect. He receives a rebuke from the Lord, and he submits himself to this. It's important too. This is where Jesus says, whoever wants to come after me, whoever wants to follow me, it's not about power. It's not about influence. It's not about an important, prominent place in the world. If you want to follow me, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Not just carry a cross, wear a cross. Carry your cross. Suffer, sacrifice, and death are the lot of anyone who follows Christ. Because if you try to save your life, you'll lose it. But if you lose your life for the sake of the Lord and the gospel, you will find your life. So what will it profit you if you gain the whole world but forfeit your life? What will you give in return for your life? Right? It's an interesting thing. I think that I've just been doing some reading on the medieval papacy, and it's clear that they were very, very familiar with the earlier passage, with verse 13 to 20, and it seems like they completely skipped verse 24 to 26 about trying to gain the whole world. Anyway, I don't want to criticize, but this is an important point to deny. We do not hold that the papacy, or that any human being, any bishop, has that level of authority, or perfection, or infallibility. All of us are servants. All of us are called to carry our cross. So, anyway, that's enough of that. That's it for day 3. God bless you all, and we will see you next week.